Let's jump right into this deep dive and demystify our mind's incredibly frustrating tendency to just hyper-focus on the negative. Think about it. Have you ever had a completely normal, maybe even fantastic day, but then you go to bed and you're lying awake just fixating on that one slightly awkward interaction, or maybe just one tiny piece of critical feedback? Well, it happens to all of us. So today, we're going to look at the actual science behind exactly why your brain does this, and, way more importantly, how you can start rewiring it. Let's start with a really brilliant metaphor from neuropsychologist Dr. Rick Hansen. He says, notice how our brains let positive events slide right off us like Teflon, while negative events just stick in our minds like Velcro. I mean, you could receive a glowing performance review at work, right? 10 points of absolute high praise, and just one tiny little area for improvement, and I can almost guarantee your brain is going to latch onto that single criticism like it's literally a matter of life and death. This phenomenon is officially known in psychology as the negativity bias, and the absolute crucial point here is that it's not some personality flaw you have, it's actually a deeply ingrained biological survival mechanism. You see, our evolutionary ancestors didn't survive by stopping to smell the roses or, appreciating beautiful sunsets. They survived by constantly scanning the horizon for predators. Over thousands of years, our neurobiology was basically shaped to treat bad news as extremely urgent and good news as a total luxury. Moving into section 1, hardwired from the sandbox, let's look at childhood development. Because if this is truly a biological mechanism, we should be able to see it operating way before the complexities of adult life even set in, right? You might be asking yourself if we just pick up this cynicism as adults, maybe worn down by the news and daily stresses, or if it's there right from the very start. Do we learn to be drawn to the negative, or is that software basically pre-installed at birth? Well, this next bit brilliantly illustrates the answer. There's this fascinating study published in the Journal of Experimental Child Psychology, and it reveals that even 4-year-olds have this bias totally hardwired into them. Researchers really wanted to know if young preschool children, who generally view the world with a sort of positivity offset, assuming most people are nice, would show a heightened memory for threatening social information. So to test this, the researchers showed these little 4-year-olds faces paired with different actions. Some were super positive, like Jessica brought in cookies and everyone got some. And some were negative, like Kevin stole everyone's cookies and no one got any. When tested on their memory later, the preschoolers had a massive, significant memory advantage for the specific details of the negative actions. They remembered exactly who the mean kids were and exactly what they did. Their brains were naturally cataloging those threatening actors to protect themselves in the future. It's a literal built-in safety mechanism operating right there in the sandbox. All right, section 2, the anatomy of negativity, the 4 elements of bias. Let's break down exactly how this bias operates in our daily adult lives. It's not just some general vague feeling. Scientists have actually categorized the specific ways negativity distorts our reality. Researchers Paul Rosen and Edward Roisman identify 4 academic elements of the negativity bias. First up is negative potency, meaning negative events are just inherently more prominent. Second is the steeper negative gradient, which dictates how events feel as they get closer in time. Third is negativity dominance, where the whole becomes way more negative than the sum of its parts. And finally, negative differentiation, which shows that our vocabulary and our whole conceptualization of negative things are vastly more complex than for positive things. Now, to really understand that third point, negativity dominance, consider what psychologists call the dishonest person paradox. Think about how one single dishonest act can just permanently ruin an honest person's reputation. Yet on the flip side, one honest act almost never redeems a notoriously dishonest person. The negative information entirely dominates our judgment of them. Basically, we consider negativity to be a much more accurate diagnostic tool for a person's true character, mainly because society just expects positive behavior as the baseline default. We also see this vividly with the steeper negative gradient. Imagine if you put 10 compliments and 10 insults on a mental scale. You'd logically think they'd balance out, right? But the negative side heavily tips the balance. Our brains simply form a vastly stronger emotional connection to the negative. It requires so much more cognitive processing power to deal with negative information, which means it leaves a significantly deeper footprint in our memory. And what's truly fascinating here is that negativity is a literal attention magnet on a physiological level. Laboratory studies show that when people are presented with negative words, they actually blink more often. They experience an increased heart rate and even larger increases in pupil diameter compared to when they're processing positive words. So your autonomic nervous system literally goes into a heightened state of alert just reading a bad word. absolutely wild. Moving on to Section 3, the neuroplasticity superpower, rewiring your brain. But hey, here is the really good news. We are not doomed to remain stuck in this biological trap. Yes, the negativity bias is a super powerful default setting, but we have a superpower that can override it. And that superpower is neuroplasticity. Dr. Rick Hansen points out an incredible truth here. He says, the brain takes its shape literally, physically, in structure and function from which your mind repeatedly rests upon. So this means our attention is a trainable muscle. Just as artificial intelligence uses attention mechanisms to process data, we can deliberately control where we place our focus to actually rewire our brain's physical neural networks for better stress resilience and optimism. And it's not just happening up in our heads. Surprisingly, neurosurgeon James Doughty points out that our heart actually has its own nervous system composed of about 40,000 neurons. What's absolutely mind-blowing about this is that the heart sends far more neural signals up to the brain than the brain sends down to the heart. So when we engage in compassion and cultivate positive emotions, we are fundamentally altering this core conversation between our heart and our mind. So let's get into Section 4, tools to train your brain, science-backed techniques. How do we actually practically tap into this mind-heart connection to upgrade our mental software? We've diagnosed the problem, so let's look at the science-backed techniques you can use right now to overcome this bias. The first tool starts with how we treat ourselves. When the Dalai Lama was talking with Western meditation teachers, he learned that people in the West deeply struggle with self-compassion. He was genuinely astonished by this. He noted that in classical languages like Tibetan or Sanskrit, the word for compassion automatically includes oneself. He realized English almost needed an entirely new word just to capture that concept. So if you're someone whose negativity bias constantly turns inward into self-criticism, try using the best friend technique. When you make a mistake and that inner critic just starts yelling at you, pause and ask yourself, what would I say to my best friend in this exact situation? You would never be as cruel to a friend as you are to yourself, right? Apply that exact same kindness and understanding to yourself. It immediately helps short-circuit that negative self-talk. Another incredibly powerful daily tool is called taking in the good. Because positive experiences just slide off us like Teflon, we have to consciously help them stick. This means deliberately finding 3 to 5 simple positive experiences each day. Maybe it's just the smell of fresh coffee in the morning or a really warm smile from a stranger, and consciously marinating in them for a few minutes. You want to actually feel that sensation in your body. Doing this daily physically begins to imprint these positive experiences right onto your neural network. Finally, we have the linking technique, which uses the famous rule that neurons that fire together wire together. Here's how it works. First, you identify a persistent negative thought or fear, and you just let it sit quietly in the background of your mind. Then, you intentionally bring a vivid, powerful, positive experience right into the bright foreground of your awareness. You hold both of them simultaneously. By letting the positive experience unfold fully while the negative one just sits back in the shadows, that positive neural connection gradually begins to soothe and actually transform the negative memory over time. Overcoming this bias isn't magic, guys. It's neuroscience. It takes consistent effort, kind of like going to the gym, but for your attention. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Have you ever wondered what your life would actually be like with less negativity bias? What goals might you pursue? And what amazing potential could you unlock if you started training your brain to focus on the good starting today?